Hello, everyone. I hope that you're all able to see me and hear me now.
Yes,
Yeah,
sounds good, Rola. Go ahead.
perfect. Okay. So welcome to the March LESLLA and NATECLA. This is the first coffee break that we've got in collaboration with NATECLA. I'm not sure, I did call it a spring coffee break, but I'm not sure it's springs. It certainly doesn't feel like this here in the UK, but hopefully it does wherever you're joining us from. And for those who are just new to LESLLA and NATECLA, they're joining us for the first time. So LESLLA is the Literacy Education and Second Language Learning for Adults, and NATECLA is the National Association for Teaching English and Other Community Languages to Adults, okay? So the two organizations mainly focus on issues related to literacy education and second language learning from different perspectives. For our organization, this is the LESLLA Board of Directors, and if I can invite you all to just put your video on, please, and wave so people will recognize those of you who are with us. And Patsy has already put in the chat the links to the NATECLA website, the NATECLA organization. Okay, and let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. So most of the time for the all of our events, we've got people from all parts of the world, like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Iceland. Although with the time zones, it's not that easy, but we are always happy to see people from all parts of the world, all different backgrounds joining us for these coffee breaks. So I can see already that we've got people from Spain, Wales, UK, US, yeah, Netherlands, wow, yeah, Florida, Canada, Arizona, Indiana, perfect, yeah. Keep them coming. It's always good to, from Cape Town. Perfect, okay. So if this is your first time joining a coffee break, just want to introduce you to what exactly do we do and what is the main aim of these coffee breaks, okay? So our main aim is actually to connect with fellow LESLLA educators from all over the world, share a few LESLLA updates about the organization, things that we're doing, but also share examples of best practice, which all the time, like our experts and our attendees, share examples from their context, from their countries, and most of the time, one of the most important things that all of the attendees find quite useful about these coffee breaks is actually what goes in the chat on top of what is presented as well. So they would add links, resources, information about things that not all of us maybe are familiar with in different parts of the country that are taking place. So this is kind of like what we've done so far. We had two coffee breaks, two winter coffee breaks, one in December and one in January. And we got now, one of the board members is going to put the link to the Padlet, so you can share with us suggestions for future coffee breaks. So this is how we decide on the themes for our coffee breaks and who to invite to present. If you've got also ideas, if you've got examples, if you've got any projects that you would like to present at one of these coffee breaks, please do get in touch with us. Add the information to the Padlet about what topics, what themes you're interested in. If you're interested in watching the previous coffee breaks and the webinars, the recordings from the previous coffee breaks, they are already now in the chat. And thank you very much, Patsy. You're doing a great job sharing all of these links. And also we'd like to invite you to register for our next coffee break, and the registration link is already now in the chat. Okay, so the next coffee break is in April. It will be on a different topic with a theme mainly for the Australia from with Australian presenter from Karen Bush project. But for today, we're so happy and glad to have with us like Joanna Davidson-Hajto and Nan Frydland, and they're going to talk about like low-tech ideas in the LESLLA context. So we've heard a lot of like webinars, we've attended a lot of webinars about like how technology works in the LESLLA context, particularly with the current kind of COVID lockdown crisis, most classrooms moving online. So what they're going to share is their experience of how we can do this with low-tech technology. So Joanna works with, as a program lead at the Hounslow Adult and Community Education. And for those of you outside the UK, this is in London. And she identifies herself as a teacher, coach, mentor, blogger, volunteer, inspired by teaching, planning, and never-ending conversations with colleagues. Her experience is from Scotland, Manchester, and London. And Nan is also a TESOL educator whose practice and research interests are based on low literate adult migrants and also issues of social justice, equity, culturally responsive pedagogy, and so on. So we're so glad to have both of them here with us today and to take us through some examples of how they've managed to turn their classrooms into a low-tech classroom, interactive classroom, okay? So I'm gonna hand over to Joanna and sorry.
Hi, hello. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all. My part of the coffee break will be focusing on the planning for some beginners groups who start their journey with technology and possibly learning languages. So there will be two very important elements that every teacher needs to consider before the actual course or lessons start. So I will be presenting some ideas that I perceive as flexible, and I understand that everybody has got a unique and specific context they operate within. So obviously, you know your learners, you know their needs, and you teach different courses. You prepare some learners for their exams. Some courses do not have the exams at the end. So obviously that gives everybody the flexibility, and I just wanted to present my ideas at a very general level so everybody can find something to use or amend to use further. So I think I'm ready to move on, yes, to the next slide. Thank you, Rola. So what happens in our online classrooms? Teaching a language, we always want to focus on the skills. So obviously the speaking and listening skills, followed by reading and writing skills. But at this stage, knowing that we are all in the online world, we have to consider the digital skills. And I think they've got the equal place, really, next to the basic skills that we have been teaching forever, always, in our practices. We have to be creative even more than we might have been in the physical classrooms. So we have to engage our learners and motivate them to attend our classes. And we have to be, at the same time, we have to be interactive, really. We have to encourage the learners to be taking part in the lessons and enjoy them. So that is a big challenge, and I am sure a lot of things that I will be talking about today happens in your classrooms, and I will be really interested later on to hear from you what techniques you might have used and how you found them, if they work for you, if they don't, and maybe you've got some ideas how to improve them. So I will be really interested in learning that. Can we move on? Thank you. So I think everybody can relate to this piece of art, really. We know we are doing our best, but sometimes when we reflect on our practice, we might feel that not everything has gone that well or as we expected. But let me assure you that's the standard practice, and this is a lot of us might be thinking, but always think about what the learners have got out of it and how they might have seen your teaching, your materials and your performance when you teach them. So I'm sure they really like what you do and they benefit from your lessons. Okay, so thank you. I decided, when I was thinking about this presentation, I decided to highlight the importance of planning. And obviously we all plan, we dedicate a lot of our time towards planning, and we always know that not everything that we have got in our lesson plans will happen in the classroom, which is again the standard thing that happens. And before we move on to the next slide, may I just ask you to put some of your ideas or why you think planning is important, and what do you gain by planning your lessons in advance, reflecting on the previous practice. If you could add some comments to the chat box, please. So what do you find beneficial? Maybe can we go back, Rola? Oh yes, thanks. So maybe yes. So if you could add some possible benefits that you find the most important for you in the chat box. I just wait one moment for people to add some. Yes, you organize your time better. Yes. You've got a structure, which is again very important, not only for you, but also for the learners. Yes, you know what the gaps are and what the needs are of your learners, so you can cater for them. Thank you. Yes, a lot of good ideas I can see in the chat. Rola, can you please go to the next slide? I have put some ideas which I'm sure are matching your answers. So we can highlight our expectations. We can consider the learners' expectations that they might have communicated earlier to us. We know where we are. We know what we want to prove in our practice, but also we know what the learners need to practice in our session. We know what we have in our curriculum, so we can match the curriculum part with the needs of our learners. By planning, we also build routines for our learners, which are important, and I will be mentioning that later on slightly more in detail. Obviously, the time management is always something I'm sure every teacher would like to improve further. I'm one of those teachers, and we can manage and chunk down the content we want to introduce. And again, a lot of you might agree with me that the time flies when we teach online, and we usually plan more than we can use in a session. So obviously that element and that awareness of the fact that we need to be really giving the learners bits by bits. It's so not, especially when we teach the beginners. So less is more when it comes to the online environment. Yes, so I would like to now focus on some very simple tools I have tried before, and I found them useful myself. So when planning, I like, for example, to be taking notes, and I find them visual for me, so they support my planning in general. So what I think it might be useful to start with is to do a little audit on what the digital skills we need for a class we teach. And obviously there are a lot of different skills that we might want to consider, but maybe this is the stage where we need to really stop and think and prioritize those important skills at the beginning. So for example, if you teach a video session, a live video session, then you need to ensure that the learners know how to join that session. So that would be the basic, the very, very basic skill that we take for granted, but not all our learners might be confident doing that. So we start with the basics. Can you go back, Rola, to the previous one? Sorry. Yes. So we start with the basics, and then we really have to monitor as we go. As we teach, we see how the learners progress, if they need more practice with certain skills, or if they feel confident, and we can move on and expand their skill set. And also, as you can see on the right-hand side, that is a slightly more in detail table that I again find useful, is where you know what skills you are going to implement or introduce in your digital classroom. But then you start looking at what your learners know, and what equipment they have, so you can really match and connect everything into one big picture. So when you plan, you are aware to say, oh, okay, this is a device a learner has, and then you would probably be able to say how much you can do using that particular device. And then if you see there is still that area for improvement for that learner, you can still keep it handy. And when you plan, you can remember that this is the skill that the learner still needs to practice further. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And this is, I will not be reading these questions out really, but obviously we all reflect on our practice and we always have some things we want to change or amend or improve. And obviously these are some questions that I feel might be useful when we look back and when you plan further, especially when teaching online. So we might want to consider again in detail the digital skills in relation to a particular lesson or a particular task when we ask the learners to complete it. And again, as I mentioned before, less is more. So it might be a slightly stricter approach we decide to take on picking the resources and the tasks or materials, because not all of the resources we might want to be using will be directly linking to the lesson and aims and objectives, for example. So that is something we might want to have handy, like this set of questions. So when we plan, we really get to the point and we eliminate anything that might not be the best idea for the live session to be used in your session, because some tasks, my example would be the gap fill, might be, for example, better to be used as homework or to be done in the learner's own time. So thank you for this one. Can we go to the next one here? So I'm not sure what time it is and how much time do I still have. If someone could just tell me I'm halfway through or...
Sure. So it's 20 minutes after, Rola?
Yeah, I think yes, we still have some time. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think that's great. So thanks. So I think it's time that I would present some practical examples, and I will be looking at 4 skills. So speaking and listening, reading and writing. And I have been trying to make them, again, as I said, flexible for your specific context, and then that would allow you to mix and match and pick what is best for you, your practice. And before I introduce the first examples, I just wanted to highlight again the fact that you will probably start with the teacher-led approach first. So you will be showing, modeling, supporting the learners, giving instructions, asking the learners to practice a certain skill. But as the time progresses, you will definitely give your learners more autonomy. So they will try to do some things on their own. And obviously a lot of encouragement, motivational and positive feedback would be your ally here, because then the learners would feel more confident, and when they feel secure, they would be eager to try new things more often. So speaking and listening to start with, we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I have given 4 ideas here, and every idea might have some additional bits to consider. So depending on how confident your student or your students might be. So when you do speaking and listening tasks, maybe this first example is specifically for the listening skills tasks, is you might want to ask your learner to copy the questions into the notebook. So instead of sharing a document in a digital form, you might, if you have time, you might ask them to copy the questions, for example, from the screen. At the same time, they practice their handwriting skills. So there is that additional benefit to that. But if you think you don't have enough time to let learners copy in the live session, you might want to email or send a message in a chat, depending on, again, what devices or what software or platform you're using. So you send them before the lesson, and the learners can prepare their own notes before the class. Or you can even the lesson before, if you plan in advance and you are able to, you've got enough time to plan a few sessions in advance, you might want to show a photo, for example, and then they could just take a photo of the screen, for example, or a screenshot, and they could again prepare the writing bits in advance. Then we have got the next idea, which is displaying instructions and guides. No, sorry, thank you very much. So displaying instructions and guides. So obviously for the speaking part, I found that one really useful, because then if the learners start their journey with learning English, they would benefit from having a lot of model examples and some vocabulary that they could use to make sure that they've got ideas and they don't struggle, they don't stop because they cannot remember, for example, some verbs. So if you display some prompts on the screen, that could be useful for the speaking task. The next one I was thinking about is, this would be slightly higher when it comes to the level of the digital skills, but then you can ask the learners to complete some shared documents when they are in the live session. So they could be doing the speaking or the listening tasks at the same time completing the documents. But it might be that the learner doesn't have a device or is not confident enough to do that. So then a classmate could be asked to be a secretary for a colleague, for a classmate, or a teacher can do it while listening to the learner's answers. And the last bit is, I was thinking about shy learners, and I'm sure a lot of us have met learners who might have been very confident in a face-to-face environment, but they might be quite shy when being online. So that, to make sure that we involve everybody and everybody has got a chance to say something, I was using some kind of a queue and a list. So knowing who is in my live session, I would make a list on the screen of all the names in a random order. And then the learners would know that they have to contribute to a discussion, or they have to ask some questions following the order. So then this is a nice idea to reduce teacher talking time, because then they know who's next, and there is no element of teacher being involved, which is always good for practicing skills like speaking. Could we possibly go to the next one, Paula? Thank you, slide. So reading skills would be next. And some ideas, if you can see, the first bit is quite similar, because that would be, again, a receptive skill, like the listening one. So obviously the questions and the comprehension tasks could be approached in a very similar way to the listening tasks. But then you could be very flexible and creative when it comes to answering the comprehension questions, because the learners could write in their notebook and then talk about and give the answers verbally. They could send a photo, for example. So that would be, again, another basic skill, but that skill is usually used in their lives, personal lives. So a lot of us take photos every day. Chat box could be used effectively, so the learners could insert their answers in the chat. But there is a little bit I put here in brackets here. I find, for better signposting, make sure you use numbering for your questions, because then when you do the feedback with the class, the learners might get very confused and lost when it comes to navigating between the answers and the questions. Multiple choice questions might be a solution, so there is no writing involved there, but the learners could just pick the correct answers. And the final one, the most advanced one within the beginners, I would say, is typing the answers in the document. Okay, thank you very much. May we just go to the next set of ideas, which would be about writing. And I think, yes, and the next one, thank you. So again, writing skills usually come at the end. And these ideas would be, again, similar to the previous ideas I mentioned, but we can start with some photos. So the handwriting is done in a notebook, but then the photo is taken and the teacher gets the photo via email or in the chat. You might want to use the email as the medium for communication. So instead of creating a document using Word, for example, the learner would just use the email to communicate with the learner, even before the attachment is in the email, just in the email body. So you can ask the learner to handwrite the task in the class time and type things up later on, or the other way around. So the homework is done. I think I've mixed things up here. Handwritten in the class time. Yes, and they could, yes, so the task could be done at home, but then the typing element is done in class. It always depends on what you're planning to do and what your aims and objectives are. And the final one is typing up in the document, breakout rooms for group work, and then you can assign different roles at different times, so the learners could use different skills in different sessions. Or you can ask the learners what they would like to do. So that would be for them to choose what they feel comfortable with. So I think that would be it. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if the next, yes, the next part would be for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanna, for this very interesting presentation. And I think there was a lot going on in the chat. People have commented that they found the questions quite useful, very good, and for their planning. We've got a question as well from Marcel, and I think the question is about how teachers help their learners and students how to learn how to share photos. And what exactly do you use to do this? And I think most people in the chat have been saying that they are using WhatsApp. So I don't know if you've got any further like comments or suggestions to share about how teachers teach their learners how to share photos.
Oh, you mean for any of these skills?
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
I think if I've got the question right.
Yeah, for example, I'll just chime in, Rola, as well. A question kind of connected, like how would they share a photo of something that appeared in their notebook, for example? Do you share your cell phone with your class? Have you found a workaround? There have been some ideas in the chat, but do you have anything else you'd want to add?
Just one thing, which would be more to make the workload, handling the workload easier, which is I know the examples when learners send too many photos, because for example, for each page, they would send a photo, and if the task is for, I don't know, 3 or 4 pages, then the photos are multiplied, and it might be quite tricky for the tutor to navigate if you know the tutor wants to give feedback. So there are some applications, and I know they might not be at the lowest level possible, but maybe some practice that is recommended could be worth looking into. When I think that free application is called Genius Scan, when you can take photos, but all of them convert into a PDF, so one bigger document that has all the pages all together. So that could be an idea, I think.
Yeah, I think this is quite useful, and I think some people have put in the chat that they've been using Telegram, Zoom, other kind of like platforms in order to support their learners in a similar way to what you've suggested. So any further questions, any things I didn't pick on from the chat, because it's going quite fast and sometimes it's not that easy to follow. So
it is, that's why we work in teams here. So yeah, a nice comment from Javier Munoz. Thank you for that, about how having a variety of options like this definitely is consistent with universal design for learning and gives students lots of kind of points of access and ways into the work. So thank you for that. Luisa mentions the app Cam Scanner is good for documents. So that's one I don't know. And then several other apps that were mentioned in the chat. So people, if
Great.
you're not familiar with Zoom, you can grab the chat at the end. There's a way to do that, actually. There are 3 little dots. I think everyone can save the chat. I wouldn't do it now because you want to do it at the end when you get everything, but so you would be able to grab that as well. And of course, this presentation will be posted on the LESLLA website as well.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add, it's all about building the routines like block by block. We will not do it at the same time. We have to be patient, and we have to keep adding and expanding on what we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And I think this was very useful for everyone. And there is more going on in the chat about like the use of break rooms or chat, or even like using voice notes in WhatsApp and so on. So I think since WhatsApp has been mentioned a lot, I'm so glad to welcome our next presenter today, Nan Frydland. And Nan is going to talk about like how she moved her class from to a low-tech class in a short period of time. So I'll give the floor to Nan. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rola. So I'm briefly going to start out with where I was a year ago when I had 2 medium or large size classes of low literacy learners in Stamford, Connecticut in an adult education program. I had a basic class and a level 1 class. And if we could see the first slide, please. Thank you. So this is the information about those 2 classes, and I'm going to give you some details about how I manage these classes. So you can see the basic class, we met 4 mornings a week, and the level 1 class, we met twice a week in the evening. The next slide, please. So I'm sure most of you are aware of the characteristics of students with limited or interrupted education and LESLLA learners. They're similar, but you know these 2 groups, they overlap, but they're also different. The elements that they have in common that I find particularly useful to understand are informed through the lens of culturally responsive teaching, and also through the mutually adaptive learning paradigm, big on initialisms here. MALP is one example of a way that you can implement culturally responsive teaching. And I was trained to deliver instruction. I know I'm not supposed to say deliver, that's like a pizza. The way I was taught to teach was through the lens of culturally responsive teaching. And so the most important aspect of this, in my view, is that learners come to us from backgrounds where their learning has a purpose in their real life right now. It's something you're learning to fix your bike, or you're learning to do a job, weave a basket that you're going to sell at the market on Saturday. But it's not something that has to do with the individualist cultural idea that you have education for a future benefit, like you get a college degree and then you work on Wall Street. This is about something, learning is something that's useful today. And most of the people who come to the United States where I'm teaching come with very different priorities, beliefs, and interests, not only in their lives, but specifically about education and what the classroom should look like. Interconnectedness is a really essential element to people who come from collectivist cultures. And what that means is that they are likely to want to establish a closer relationship with teachers than is common in a formal education environment like the United States. And we have to use that to our benefit, and we have to honor students who want a closer relationship. For some of us, that's easier than others. We'll catch up with this later. Another thing to maximize is that many learners come here and they're used to learning all kinds of things through the spoken word rather than something that's written or in a digital text. And finally, many of our learners come with attitudes about cooperation and collaboration that are more typical of collectivist culture characteristics than the individualist culture that the United States promotes. Next slide, please. So in order to teach in a culturally responsive way, I developed something that I call a scroll, which is the lowest tech thing you can possibly imagine. And it came when I was teaching a bunch of day laborers in a warehouse where we didn't even have a whiteboard. We had some partitions to kind of make a corner of a room into a classroom. I took huge pieces of butcher paper and some painter's tape I had in my garage, and I put these up on the wall. And so when students speak, the most important thing to me in terms of the content that we're going to use as a focus of the language and instruction is what the students say. It's not what a book the teacher chose has to say. And so the first thing is I ask students questions and I write every word that they say on a big white piece of paper that's taped to a brick wall. And then at night I come home and I type that up and I make it into a PowerPoint. In the old days, I would give the students handouts the next day. And so all of that text, all of that content was language that I got from the students. That is the foundation of our curriculum. Next slide, please. So in the old days, I started out with a big piece of paper on a board and I would handwrite as students dictated to me. I would ask them questions. So imagine all the kinds of learning that are going on when I say, where are you from? And then in the box that says home country, I write Central African Republic. So I've asked a question, a student has answered the question, and we've formatted it in something that has rows and columns, which already is reflecting a PowerPoint table or just a table that you will see in a million different formats. So we gather information like this because it's from the students and about the students, and I'm using their familiar language and content in order to get to the next level of teaching. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we did a lot in the old days was the learning experience approach. And so here are a couple of students. There were 20 students working on this, this poster, but all of us went out into the street with our cell phones, and we took pictures of signs and buildings in our neighborhood. And before we left, I gave those students those green pieces of paper. And so each student, there was a pair of students, they had to go find a place, and then they had to stand in front of the place. So there's our school, there's a bank, there's the library, there's a convenience store. So two students would have a word that said convenience store. And we walked all around the neighborhood and they had to find the convenience store, take a picture of themselves in front of the convenience store, and then send the picture to the teacher. Next slide, please. And so in the old days, I would put those into a PowerPoint and I would hand them in paper to them the next day. So this is what one page might look like. Next slide, please. And then these are other slides. These are photos that the students sent me. So now I'm getting real content from the students directly. In front of getting it in the classroom, I'm getting students to send me photos. And then I make this composite of the student photos and my questions and language. Next slide, please. So about a year ago, we were given a few hours notice that we were going to shut the school down and we were going to start teaching online. This was Friday the 13th, and Monday we were miraculously going to start teaching online. So what we did was we created WhatsApp groups on our phones. This is what we were advised by the administration. And at the time, I thought we were just going to be using phones to talk to each other. Next slide, please. But I realized over the weekend, since my students didn't have computers, never mind computer skills, that all I had to work with WhatsApp. And so in the course of the weekend, this is what I came up with. Next slide, please. I decided to take some of those photos that the students had already sent me and the pages that we already had, and I decided to start sending those as pictures in a WhatsApp window. Next slide, please. So I would have a slide that looked like this, and I used WhatsApp Web. So you download WhatsApp to your phone, and then you upload WhatsApp Web on your computer. And with your phone, you take a picture of a QR code, and it connects your phone to the computer. Now, when I open up WhatsApp on my computer, I can open up any kind of file, like a Google Drive or a file of photos or a particular slideshow. And I can just take a picture. I can just slide this slide into the window of WhatsApp. Next slide, please. So these are just examples of the kinds of things that I used on WhatsApp. Next slide, please. Again, students kept sending me photos. Now you see, oh, the next one, please. Here we see on the right, I've opened up a file called Our Book. And Our Book is a collection of all these PowerPoint slides that the students and I have collaborated to create. Over on the left, I'm sending a slide to the students, and I ask them to either text me or to speak to me. So I say the words, they say the words, then they do the fill-in. And this is the back and forth that you can see on the left side. So WhatsApp is on the left and PowerPoint is on the right. Next slide, please. So then I thought, well, this is pretty boring after the first day. So I started making home videos because these wonderful Canadian teachers have made all of these wordless books. And a lot of times they take pictures of their own family. So here we are in lockdown. I want to make some videos. And so I just started videotaping my husband, my cat, or my husband videotaped me doing the housework. Next slide, please. So I had videos like, I'm ironing the shirt. So in WhatsApp, I would just click on the video as an attachment, and then I would send it to the students. And then they could turn the video on and watch it, and they could speak the words themselves, send that in a voice message, and then I would send a voice message back, either praising their grammar, their pronunciation, or correcting their pronunciation. Next slide. And so using the videos, we were able to use more and more closes in a way to develop some vocabulary and some speaking and some listening. Next slide, please. And so here you can see all the different things that I'm teaching in this one series of slides. What did she do in the morning? What did she do in the afternoon? What did she do in the evening? What did she do yesterday? Next slide. And then here we have that culmination of questions that they can fill in. And they can either send a voice message where they're speaking it, or they can text the words and send them to me. Next slide, please. So initially we were just texting, and then as I developed some proficiency with the microphone on WhatsApp, we were speaking more and more to each other. Next slide, please. So here we have Mishu, who sends me various pictures, and I put the text on. Next slide, please. And in this way, students are learning vocabulary about themselves. They're learning in context. They're learning all kinds of grammar things without the attention going to the grammar. Next slide, please. They're learning all about what people do in their spare time. Next slide, please. And so I found that WhatsApp really worked because...
Rolla, we've lost your PowerPoint if you want to try and recover.
Sorry about this.
No problem.
Yeah.
Do you want me to present for a moment?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, give us just a second, friends. Are you seeing that?
Yes, I think that's perfect. Thank you very much, Patsy.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's
Tell me
see,
where to go here.
slide. Oh, it's my slide 30, but yes, you can just continue. Thank
Okay,
you.
no problem.
Thank you. And then we'll end up on the page why it works.
There we
So
go.
I found that for low literacy learners, WhatsApp was something that they had probably been using already. Now, but nobody had used it as a teaching platform before in their lives. So the problem was a lot of my older students didn't understand when I texted them over the weekend and I said, we're going to have class on Monday and we're going to do it in WhatsApp. I'm going to give you this invitation and we're going to have class. A lot of them also, when we went into lockdown, they went to different locations to be with family. But WhatsApp did work because we were able to text, to video, and send photos. The students had a lot of input and we were able to do a lot of things together, including making mistakes and being very awkward with the platform initially. For students who needed scaffolding, the photos really worked. I have to say that it was a much slower pace than what we normally have face-to-face, but at the same time, it was too fast for some of the lower literacy students who also had trouble with the technology. Next slide, please. Yes. And, I think, it was very teacher-centered also. And this was also, a big problem. There was a big privacy issue for a lot of people. I have adults in my classroom, and so they were all in choice. You want to share your phone number for WhatsApp? Fine. If you don't, that's fine too. We were encouraged by our school, our program. They implemented this for hundreds of students without a problem. And in some ways, I felt this was more culturally responsive than the ordinary way of teaching because it was so visual and so orally based instead of textually based. Next slide, please. So now a year later, as a result of doing this webinar a year ago, I was hired by a community-based organization where we have an incredible schedule. Even for low literacy learners, we have an intensive English program where students are instructed 25 hours a week. I deliver 20 of those hours and computer teachers deliver the other 5. This school was so smart that over the summer, they got all the Google grants they could so that we were all sent to Google Classroom, Educator Instruction, and every student, when they registered in the fall, was interviewed and asked, do you have a Chromebook or a laptop? So that when we went into lockdown again in November, all of my low literacy students left that school with a Chromebook. Next slide, please. So today's resources look very different than they did a year ago. Now I have low literacy students who are able to use Chromebooks and able to connect in a Google Meet 3 hours a day. Also, whenever I have books for them, I just put them in the mail, or sometimes I leave them at the school and they pick them up at the school. I mailed them little plastic base 10 math manipulatives, and we've been using those. And I also made sure that they all left the school with a whiteboard for writing. Sometimes it's just the easiest way to communicate, that they can use a felt tip marker on a whiteboard and hold it up in the screen. Next slide, please. So this is what WhatsApp looks like today. Now that I have low literacy students, I've really been trained to use WhatsApp by me and the Chromebook by the computer teachers. So how do you celebrate Christmas at home is not like a high point of culturally responsive teaching. I normally say, CRT is not heroes, holidays, and international potluck. But as a matter of course, every holiday that we're celebrating in the United States is an opportunity to find out about other people's cultures as well. And so here we have examples on the left of 2 different ways that students were able to answer my question in a Google Meet by using WhatsApp. And one did a Google search and sent me a photo with a text and an emoji, and the other student wrote by hand and sent me a picture. Next slide, please. So I continue to have students do a lot of low-tech things because I think they're really useful. We understand from the constructivists that students will learn a lot when they do things by hand instead of doing them on a keyboard. So students are given a big loose leaf binder with tabs from A to Z. And each week I ask them to put entries in their picture dictionary. I don't give them definitions. They find the definitions, they create the definitions, and they illustrate the definitions. Next slide, please. I also equip students with a large white plain book, and each week they make a culture entry. We've discussed flags, holidays, and we keep records of different members of our families and all kinds of other things that students write and illustrate by hand, because I think these are really important aspects of reading and learning. Next slide, please. On the other hand, when we were in the classroom, I can now use a smart board to make a chart like this, or I can make the chart again on a whiteboard using a marker. And students were responsible for going online and finding out the number of tribes, indigenous tribes in their country, and finding out the names and some of the languages that were spoken. And so we did this. This was an exercise that we did for Columbus Day, when we learned a lot about Columbus that American students never learn about. Next slide, please. And in keeping with culturally responsive teaching, the front load of the content always comes from the students. So I have books that students from other classes and other locations have written. And before I ask my new students to write their own auto-narrative or autobiography, I first put in their hands a copy of some other student's book. And in that way, they read them and they report on that person's story before they're going to write their own. But these are then used as models for them to craft their own narratives and make them feel comfortable. And you'll see in here that multiple students got the same book. So I have copies of the same book. Like I handed out a couple of Hawa's books and I handed out a couple of Larissa's books. And the students then might report on different things. Next slide, please. I don't know what you can see. I'm going to hold this in front of my face, but here is Larissa's book that she wrote a few years ago in the International Refugee Committee where I used to work. So this is one example of a student auto-narrative. Here's another student auto-narrative where she took pictures from her home, and then she ended up in the classroom in New York City, and she took pictures of her fellow students as well as her children. So these are some of the ways that I've used culturally responsive teaching. And this book is kind of my greatest guide in creating this particular technique. And thank you very much. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Nan, for this very interesting presentation and the many examples that you've had as well. There was also a lot going on in the chat supporting what you're doing, about using like photos from the learners themselves, or also a comment from Julie about the language experience and how important it is for motivation and encouragement. But we've got like mainly 3 questions that I've picked from the chat. And the first is about like privacy issues by Julia and Marian. So they asked about like, how did you adjust the settings in WhatsApp for the groups? And also, how did you manage when most of the students don't want to show their homes? So even when they are like on kind of Teams or Zoom, they don't want to put their videos on because they don't want to show their homes. So how did you deal with these privacy issues?
Well, that's very interesting, but I haven't had any of those problems. My students have felt very comfortable. In fact, they have really, teacher, let me take a picture of the fish I'm making tonight. Let me take a picture of my nieces and nephews. And when I've shared pictures of my own home and my own family and mopping the floor and washing the windows, I think also it encourages them to also want to show their life. And so I haven't experienced it. I know a lot of other people have, but we haven't had any issues with that.
Oh, perfect. I think many people have also mentioned that they weren't allowed to use WhatsApp for this reason in their institution. So it seems that like different institutions are adopting different policies to how they deal with these different privacy issues. Yeah.
I've heard about women who are being chased by an abusive husband. And, you know, there are a lot of people who say, I'm a teacher, I'm glad nobody has my phone number. I can say for my privacy in the WhatsApp, when I give them a phone number, it's not my real phone number. It's a Google number that you just get for free to use with WhatsApp.
Yeah, and I think this is the last question that was here in the chat about like, how did you manage to change from Marian as well to hide the phone numbers and the last names? So, because this would be like a game changer for many programs if they're able to do this. So maybe we can share some steps about how you've done this later after the presentation with our members.
I'm really sorry, but I have a meeting at the end of this.
Oh, that's right. I mean, like later on, we can email it to some of our members who are interested in using WhatsApp. Yeah.
We could also do a Facebook post or something. I hope everyone's part of our Facebook group and
Yeah.
such. And some great ideas coming through the chat, actually, that might answer the question, using something called broadcasts instead of groups on WhatsApp, and using a Google Voice number, as Nan mentioned as well, instead of your actual cell phone number. Lots of innovative teachers out there. So
Diglin. I use Diglin for asynchronous learning. Sometimes I will give a little practice session sharing my screen with students, but I mostly use it because it's a great benefit to the students who are at the lower end in the classroom, who really need a lot of basic pronunciation practice, and they've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think the last question we've got as well is from Sarah about like, what books do you send to your students? You mentioned that you send the books to your students.
Oh, great. Hold on.
Yeah. Yeah.
the joy of working from home, everything's right there.
Yeah.
We're seeing some nice comments in the chat here. Yeah, go ahead, Nan. Oh, hey, we know that one.
Book 4. Standing Up for Yourself. The Coffee Lover. There's also Malala. We're going to start her next week. We're concluding with Harriet Tubman because today is Harriet Tubman Day.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of books from New Readers Press and Grassroots Press and Ion Literacy.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Nana. I think this was very useful, and both presentations have just shown us how like teachers are so good at moving from like face-to-face classrooms and to like distance learning. So kudos to all the LESLLA teachers, and I'm quite aware of the time. So just a few announcements before we end the session for today. We've taken the decision to host LESLLA, the LESLLA Symposium this year virtually. So please keep, we will keep you updated about like the sessions that we will have. We will have some plenary, some like sessions presented by the members of the LESLLA community. On August the 11th and the 12th. Our next coffee break is on the 19th of April, and the registration link is already in the chat. So if please, Patsy or Andrea, you can put that put it again in the chat. So this is to register for our next coffee break. And if you're interested in becoming a LESLLA member, if our sessions have inspired you to become a member, and remember that we've got elections coming up for at least 3 positions at the LESLLA board. So please consider joining us as a member as well. I think all the resources that were shared in the chat, you will be able to see them. And we will have a link to the webinar posted to all those who have registered, but also we also upload it to our website. So this is if you would like to go back to whatever resources were shared or information, you will be able to see it on our website and also through the link that we will be sharing. So thank you very much. I'll invite you all now to turn on your cameras, just wave goodbye, and thank you.
Yay, faces. How fun is that? Yay.
I think it's good to see some new faces and some old names that have been with us